Hallöchen. My voice sounds like AIDS. That sure is a normal way to start a video. So I have recently stumbled upon this video here, and since this is my first video, let's do something simple and respond to it. Firstly, the list. 1. Nicholas didn't start the war with Japan. The Russo-Japanese War started because of a Japanese surprise attack on Port Arthur and the competing interests in Manchuria, a region which Russia greatly helped developing by railway systems and the construction of an entire city called Harbin, designed by Russian engineers, built by Russian labor, and governed by Russian administrators. Secondly, Nicholas didn't order the shooting of Father Gapon. He wasn't even in the city when it happened. He was in Tsarskoye Selo. He was advised to do so by his ministers. Ministers he abided by because even he didn't feel like he was ready to be the ruler of Russia alone. Thirdly, the Chodinka tragedy. It was a stampede of hungry workers. Workers only present because Nicholas offered them free fruit. Then the pogroms. These pogroms had immense popular support. The Protocols of the Elders of Science, a Russian publication, had largely dissuaded the Russian populace from sympathies, although these documents were a fabrication. Then your point about the world wars. Russia had no control over joining the war. Germany declared war not preemptively because its military command feared that it would become too strong if not dealt with quickly. It's true, however, that Russia was in a state of general mobilization due to Austria's declaration of war of Serbia, which was a Russian ally. Then the curse thing, which throughout the video she mentions quite frequently as if it had any importance to actual history, but a lot of Russians, including some of Nicholas' ministers, which she mentions, did actually believe in a curse set out by Rasputin. It was the entire reason why the husband of the Tsar's niece, Felix Yusupov, and the literal Grand Duke, Dmitry Pavlovich, came to kill him. It was also very widely believed among the Russian populace until Rasputin was actually killed, which after that they started to realize that it was just Nicholas II being generally incompetent, which, as already mentioned, he himself believed was the case. Child labor. Child labor was in fact common in the Russian Empire, as it was in Soviet Russia as well. The pioneers often partook in harvesting in rural areas or were sent there from cities. This isn't really anything specific about Tsarist Russia, it is a common throughout modern-day Russian history. About the revolutions being non-violent, and this is probably one of my weakest arguments. It is true that the revolution was mostly non-violent, mostly because there was no real resistance, especially in Petrograd. However, the movie didn't even depict it as bloody, which is mostly the case because it's a children's movie. Violent, sure, but not bloody. Also, the Soviet propaganda very much agreed with the movie on the inaccurate portrayal. They really wanted to sell the coup as some heroic fight because, you know, a city just surrendering to a revolution doesn't look as good on, propaganda placards or leaflets. Then you ask your point about how the war was being conducted, specifically evacuations, scorched earth policy, and small-scale famine breaking out throughout and after the war, and during the Civil War. Scorched earth policies seem heavy, true, until you realize that this same strategy did work for Russia, and against invaders in the past, more specifically against Napoleon Bonaparte, where it massively contributed to his loss. Famously, the burning of Moscow, so that it wouldn't serve him as a resting hub for soldiers during the heavy Russian winter. Evacuations are and were a normal part of war. Germany famously had to take in many fleeing Prussian civilians as the Eastern Front was caving in, which wonder why wanted to be as far away from the Red Army as possible. America also had to evacuate southern Vietnam, not only of American GIs fleeing, but also of pro-South Vietnamese people, and Afghanistan as well. There's also a lot of Laotian people that were evacuated, mostly because of a bombing campaign that was taking place at the same time, but that's a whole different story. I also like how you make famine a part of your critique, considering some very unfunny canon events in Ukraine and southern Russia later down the line. About Koshuran, I just wanted to say the guy literally called the Irish Revolution a path-breaking event in the history of non-violence. Seriously, just look up the Easter Rising. Okay, so this is less a point of criticism as much as a theory. The group of singing people could be Baltic German royalty, which traditionally would refer to the city by its Germanic name, considering that throughout the 19th century they still spoke German and had connections to Prussia, which is an essential thing about what Germany planned during World War I, which I plan on doing a separate video on one day. Also, fun fact, because I want to contribute at least something to what is essentially a glorified reaction, the reason the city was even named St. Petersburg was because Peter the Great wanted to appear more European. A few years before, he was on what is called the Grand Embassy, where he traveled across Europe and Britain, especially Germany and the Netherlands, which he both admired. So in a way, Peter was breaking with the old Muscovian way of life, which I assume you to be a fan of in principle. Another thing that I'd like to add, and something that I only noticed on rewatch of the video, this point right here. Are you honestly complaining that a movie told from the perspective, or at least with the narration voice being Maria Fyodorovna, quote, makes you sympathize with the royal family? You're conflating a Watsonian viewpoint, which that of Maria Fyodorovna, with the Doylist view of the filmmakers here. Well, here's a reaction of a not you Russian woman to Dmitry.
Ah, Jesus. Anybody here? This looks hot. I wasn't talking about Dmitry, but, you know. I'm gonna stop. Yes, guys, this time has officially come. I don't know why I'm making such a big deal out of it. But today we're going to be watching Anastasia for the very first time. As some of you may or may not know, I am Russian.
Does this answer your question?
And if you like Anastasia, that's fine. It's entertaining and cute, and you're allowed to have autonomy over what you like. I'm personally gonna roast it, but that's just me, you know?
Also slightly off tangent, but who actually likes
to be a bit more positive though,
like,
I actually quite appreciate how well sourced the video is. Like, go in her description
like,
and
I'm okay with that.
look it up for yourself. Like,
well,
it isn't just that he's talking out of her ass here, and if you ignore the illogical banter, I'd quite recommend anyone to watch it, since the inaccuracy part of the video is quite informative. The rest of her commentary mostly goes on about the big gay, about Dmitry and plot points, and so it's unimportant. But I'm not finished yet. I'm not a huge fan of just making content of other people's content, even, you know, this is kind of what I've been doing here, so kind of a little hypocritical. So I'll add some interesting facts about the Russian Empire and Russia in general here, and actually teach you a bit about it. You know, Russia, despite of its reputation of being a massively backwards nation at the time, did contribute a lot to the world. Just a few of its inventions, all of which, for your information, were invented there before the centennial, are a precursor to the telephone, a kind of paper made from birch, a specific type of oven, the abacus, the electric arc, the electric tram, the lamp, the electric telegraph, a troika, which is a horse sleigh built by 3 horses specifically, the naval mine, the icebreaker, the plane, the hyperboloid tower, this one specifically from Vladimir Shushrov, which is the precursor to modern steel architecture and inspiration for the cooling tower designs, quite interestingly, and COVID. Oh, and perhaps most importantly, wait a minute.
Никогда не умирала слава тульских кузнецов. Самопары, смастерили для бойцов. В этом хитром самоваре кран особый боевой. За версту врагов ошпарен и пяточек огневой.